Welcome back to the channel. Here we are again working on the green 74 Bronco. I am working on hooking up the AC lines for the vintage AC and the heater hoses and finishing up a little bit of wiring back here. So I got the dash put in the last video you could see, and I had to pull it back away from the Bronco itself so I can get in here and do the AC lines and the heater hoses, which are back here. And then I started on the front, which I'll turn this around here. You can see I got the radiator put in, I got the condenser put up front, and started running some of my hoses on the engine here. The compressor, I got this one line here crimped, and I'm running it over to this bulkhead fitting, which will exit the hoses outside of the inner panel of the fender, and then they will run down here and in through here, which the heater hoses connect back there, and the AC hoses are up there. And obviously there is a fitting bulkhead plate that will attach here and have some rubber grommets for the hoses to pass through. I like running it outside of the inner fender panel. Reason being is that it just cleans up the engine bay. Vintage Air originally has you draping the hoses here, running over to the fresh air inlet box, drilling 4 holes into the plastic, and then running them down, which I don't really like because then your hoses are draped over the inner fender here. So my preferred method on a nice build like this one is to run them out here and down the side and then back in. So these will be hidden, you won't see them. The only thing you'll see is the hoses going over the top of the engine, and maybe if you look in here behind the battery that sits right here. All this stuff, the bulkhead fitting and the universal hose kit and all that is all purchasable on Vintage Air. And let me turn this around, get back in front of the camera. And yeah, so I'm gonna do a little time lapse showing you some assembly of the hoses. I still need to go to the parts store and get a couple heater hoses to tie into this as well. I will show you another item that's a must if you're going to be doing universal hose crimping, I guess I could say, or universal AC stuff, is this product here from Mastercool, and it is a hydraulic hose crimper. It's got different dies for either using a standard hose or a reduced barrier hose. It allows you to crimp either or. And what they mean by standard AC hose or reduced barrier hose is the standard size AC hose is pretty big, got a thick wall. Then they also do a reduced barrier hose, which looks like this. It's a smaller diameter. It's easier to route. It's more flexible than your larger AC hoses that are like in a standard AC kit from Vintage Air. So I kind of do a little step-by-step on marking my fittings, making sure they're indexed correctly, and then I will show you guys how to crimp them here shortly. So stay with me. Okay, so if you guys notice, there are different colors on these crimp fittings. And on this sheet that they supply with it, it tells you all your different sizes, whether you're using a standard hose, a reduced barrier hose, 5/16, 1/2 inch, 5/8, 13, 30 seconds, all that. So this is a number 10 fitting, and it's 1/2 inch, and it's got an orange coordination for that. So there's the orange fitting in there. This is pretty simple. You just slide it up in there, and you can loosen this to open up the jaw and slide it in there. Put the locking pin in there. And then I usually snug it down onto the fitting so it won't move, so then I can index the hose. So now you can kind of see here, there's my mark on the hose, there's my mark on the fitting. And I've got about, I don't know, I'm probably going to ballpark a 1/4 inch reveal on that, on the collar. So then at that point, you can go ahead and squeeze down on this to where you can't squeeze down on it anymore. All right. Then just opposite the procedure of putting it together. And then you can see there, line's marked up, or line is aligned, and then this is crimped how it's supposed to be. And then we'll go back over to the vehicle and put this back into the vehicle and show you what the finished product looked like. So when you go to assemble your AC hoses for the final time, they've got little green O-rings on them. You don't want to install them dry. A lot of the AC kits will supply oil. And I'm imagining it's probably just regular compressor oil, which is a PAG oil, P-A-G. You can probably find that at your parts store if you don't have a little tube like this that they send. And then make sure they align properly. Get that one started. This one's already got a little bit of oil on it because it was assembled before. I would definitely say like this part here, making sure that your hoses route the way you want them to, is, you know, take your time, because unless you got a bulk of hose laying around somewhere, you kind of get one shot at this with the amount of hose that they give you. So just take your time and start from a point, you know, which I like to start from my compressor. I like to start from my compressor and work my way, you know, towards the vintage AC box that's inside the vehicle there. So this will work just fine at the length that it is. And like I said, I'll figure out a way to secure it to some of the other ones, just so that it gets this bounce out of it. But that's one line. I've got to do the high side line that goes from the compressor here. It's going to wrap down and around and attach to another fitting that's going to the condenser. Then once I get done with that hose, I can do the one that comes out of the dryer and then goes over to the bulkhead fitting, and then I can work my way from there to the ones that go to the AC box. So like I said, take your time, mark everything to where you want it. You know, if you have to, you know, trim it as you go, because like I said before, you don't ever want to have too short of a hose, especially because, you know, they supply you with basically enough to make 2 hoses, but this section here also has to go from this bulkhead fitting into the cab of the Bronco and attach to your other fitting. So I will have some left over, but not very much. And, you know, I don't want to waste any. So I'll do a little time lapse so you guys can see me work some of the other hoses, and I'll get right back. So the thing about building custom anything is that a lot of times, unless you're well prepared, which I'm pretty prepared, but there are certain situations where, you know, you just need a different fitting, or, you know, you got to order something, and that's one of these situations. You know, after mocking up this high side hose that goes from the compressor over to the top port of the condenser, I was, like I told you earlier, I was thinking about just running a hose directly to a fitting and attaching it into the side of the condenser. I really didn't like that. I didn't like the shape that the hose was making, where it would be running and like potentially rubbing up against other components. So I really didn't care for that too much. I ended up mocking up the steel tube hose that they supplied to get it out past the edge of the radiator. And then if I purchase a 90-degree fitting, which they didn't supply me with one, because probably, you know, they can't give you multiples of everything, but I'll have to order one, probably be a couple days out. But I like the thought of putting a 90 on here and then tying it into this tube. I think where this hose, this high side hose, will land, you know, it'll be right next to the alternator. It'll be out of the way of the cooling fan on the alternator. It's not going to rub against the inner fender well, and it'll have a nice shape to it versus trying to loop that hose around and run it up here next to the radiator. So I think that's going to be the direction I'm going to go. So I'll have to take a pause on this one line. It's a little long, you know, which is good, so that way I can trim it to what I need once I get the 90-degree fitting in. I did do the dash 6 5/16 hose that runs from the out of the dryer and to my bulkhead fitting, so that's done. The large dash 10 hose from the compressor to the bulkhead fitting, that's done. I can come back and kind of position these where I want to and snug up the fittings. And then at that point, I can come over here and I can start working these 2 lines from the bulkhead back over here and into the heater box. So I think what I'll do is I'll go back and I'll snug up the fittings that I can and call those done. Where I've taken paint pen and made my little marks on the fitting of the hose, if you just take a little dab of rubbing alcohol or some carb cleaner and just put it on a little towel, wipe it off, it'll come right clean. And then once I get done with that stuff, I'll probably, like I said, move over here and I'll start mocking up these lines and figuring out what lengths I need and where I'm going to position those. So on to the next step. All right, well, it's been a couple days. I had to place an order with Summit Racing to order a couple fittings that I needed that I didn't have, which I talked about earlier in the video. I got my number 1045, which will be behind here attaching to the vintage AC box. And I got my number 8 90 that'll attach to the one hose in here that'll attach to that hard line that came from Vintage Air that goes to the condenser. So you can kind of see I made some progress. If you guys haven't noticed, I was trying to get done what I could while I was waiting. So I did get some heater hoses ran. I got my AC lines ran from the compressor over to the bulkhead here. I got the heater hoses ran. I mounted the electronic heater valve, and I'll zoom in so you guys can see this. And I mounted the small, I think that's a number 6 AC line. So I do have that one line that I'll have to make up. So I'll zoom you guys in here. Here's a little bit closer look of how I have things routed. You can see I mounted the electronic heater valve here, attached that to my heater hose, and I've got the one number 10 line I still have to make up, which I was waiting for that fitting. And then on the other side of the bulkhead, you can see how I kind of routed everything here. AC lines coming off the top, heater hose off the water pump, and it all routes over to here. It'll be behind the battery. So the battery will be sitting up here, so you won't see it directly unless you look over the top. And then I have this 90 fitting that it will attach to this hard line I was talking about for this number 8 hose here. So I'm going to mark my number 8 hose and get that crimped next, and then move on to the number 10 hose here. So that number 8 hose is crimped, and I've got my trigger wire hooked up for the AC compressor to the dryer switch. And when I go to wire the rest of it, I will have to connect to this terminal here under the battery tray that'll come from the actual Vintage AC unit. So that's all done. Everything here in the engine bay is basically done. The one line I have left is this number 10. So I will do a little time lapse on the number 10 wire. Excuse me, I'll do a little time lapse on the number 10 hose, and then at that point I'll show you what I have in addition to mount to the inner fender structure here to kind of protect those hoses. I'll also figure out a way to tie these up and secure them other than my zip tie, which is a temporary piece right now, just so that I can get my routing shape, and we'll go from there. What we have here is a finished product of the hoses being ran. So they're cleanly ran this way towards the motor and come out through a bulkhead fitting and wrap around, go into the kick panel and around into the box. So from this point, I have another item I want to add. They are splash shields, and what they do is they attach to the inner fender here and seal against the outside, will be the inside of the fender when the fender sits on here. Now you would think that this is going to interfere with the fender being on here, but there's actually probably about 3/8 of an inch or more of a gap that clears all of this. And you can, if you see down here, there's plenty of room because the fender's way out here. So That's a finished product on the hose routing. I did a little clamp here through a single bolt just to keep everything high and tight and drawn together and out of the way. And I will mount the splash shield next so you guys can see that as well. Here, the fender's back on. I wanted to check for clearances on everything, especially after I put that splash shield in there. The splash shield does come with a rubber seal that will end up going on the edge of it so that it'll actually compress against the fender when you put the fender on. And then that just makes for a better seal, and it keeps, you know, debris and stuff from going up into this wheel well, potentially even rocks. You know, if you're driving down a gravel driveway and you pick up some rocks in your heavily new treaded tires and you get going down the highway after being on the gravel road, they can fling off here and very well end up in the wheel well and potentially cause a dent, you know, to protrude outwards, possibly even chipping the paint when it does that. So the splash shields are nice to seal up the wheel well and keep a majority of the large debris out of there. I'm sure you'll still get dust and small particles up in there, but it does a good job of shielding most of it, and also keeping those heater core and AC lines that run through here free of large debris as well. So I'm going to pull the fender back off. I'll zoom in here and show you kind of a little close up, but I'm going to pull the fender back off, put the weather stripping on, and then put the fender on probably for the last time, I think. I might hold off, finish bolting it for another day, but for now I'll just set it back on there so that it's out of the way. But anyways, that's kind of the whole gist of AC line routing, the way I do it on some of these nicer custom builds. So let's get in here and zoom in close. With a closer look, I'll get my pen light in here. You can see the splash shield has a little bit of a gap around it, and that's where that weather stripping comes in. But too close. It does a nice job of sealing that up in here and you know, keeping the larger debris out. So pretty nice add-on. That kind of ends my video for today. If you liked what you have seen, please like, subscribe, and share. Some of this might be boring, some of it might be educational, some of you might be watching this, have an early Bronco yourself. This is just another way to do the vintage air system without running those lines over the wheel well here, and it gives it a little bit cleaner of a look. To conceal those lines, I kind of like to do that just on a nicer complete build like this. I'm a long ways from being done on this. There's lots of time involved in wiring still, plumbing for some things, brakes, steering. I got to put the column and brakes in. So I'll have plenty more videos to show you guys the progress on this. And I hope you like what you see. Hope you had a somewhat of an educational video. And if anything else, you guys get to see what I do on a daily basis, working on cool old classics. And we'll just have to catch you guys next time. Thank you.